Welcome everybody to Cyber Bulls. And so today, one of the first questions we're going to ask is, if you had the ability to make a decision here, where would you tell Elon to focus his priorities? Would you want him to be focused on the bot or FSD or maybe something else? We're also going to play a game of probabilities. What is the probability of Tesla hitting 2 million cars this year? About FSD becoming 50% uptake, solving autonomy. What are the probabilities of what's going to happen to stock outlook by the end of this year? So we've got Larry Goldberg joining us, and we've got Jeff Lutz. Thank you, guys. Thank you both.
Yep.
Let's start with you, Larry. What do you think?
You know, the question is, can you chew gum and run at the same time? Honestly, a Tesla not only can, but has to do that. I don't think it's a question of priority. I think the bot is so important to its future that it has to really have a top team there and top management and focus. The Model 2 or the next gen, whatever we want to call it, has to be a top priority in the car operation, in the vehicle operation. But at the same time, the Cybertruck, the ramp has to be, has to be a strong focus. And they have to solve the problem of getting the refreshed Model 3 out of the door. That's been a bug this year. So, you ask what's their priority. If you went to the Investor Day or watched the Investor Day deck, you saw 20 managers on that stage. Every one of them a very strong, very capable, and very experienced manager with Tesla. I would rather say, for each of those guys, what should they each be concentrating on? Because the company's, too large for one guy to be, focused. I mean, when you see the multiplicity of operations, there's the lithium plant is really getting, up there. The Shanghai mega factory is opening. The Lathrop is getting into its stride. There's just so much happening. You can't say, Elon, focus on this. It's management team, everybody, balls to the wall.
Well, what do you think Elon is focusing on, though?
I think Elon looks to the future, and the future for this company is next gen, Cybertruck, and bot. I think that, you could say FSD as well, but I think FSD, honestly, I don't want to be smug about it, but I think it's on its way. I think it's now a rollout situation more than it is a development situation. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to opine on that, because that's just a sense I have of it.
Okay, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. Look, first off, I'm not sure who's qualified. I mean, I know you're asking for our opinion, but to drive Elon's priorities or Tesla's priorities can certainly lend an opinion. I think he manages his time in a completely different, non-traditional way that most people are not accustomed to, and that actually drives a lot of the conversation online. If people just don't understand, they think he can just go somewhere and just work on something full time and then not split his time or not have meetings with other teams and other groups and other sites. It's just not how he works. He's fully connected online, and he's pretty much working probably 16 or 20-hour days in some cases. So in terms of priorities, I do think when you look at it, everything that Tesla does, everything that all of his companies do, come back to scale. And once you achieve scale, then you achieve economies from a cost perspective that allow you to do these other things and to do more things. So things that are blocking them getting to scale, I think, are going to take his priority. So the Model 2 vehicle, I think, is a top priority inside of Tesla in the execution of it. I think Cybertruck is in the mode of of ramping up and stomping out issues and bugs, and then also dealing with like, okay, there's a couple of thousand of these in the field. One thing that companies do is they're hyper vigilant about the first couple hundred or thousand, issues that come in from the field, whether they're calls or whether they're physical returns for service. Companies take those first couple and they actually, they're talked about in the engineering office. They're talked about in the engineering and operations lab of like, hey, what happened here? How could this have happened? And how do we take the time we identify an issue to it's rolling into the line, and how do we get that done in, days, minutes, hours, days? And so that's the Cybertruck focus, I think, right now is, A, getting to scale, but B, stomping out any of these hardware, software, manufacturing bugs quickly. That's what companies do when they launch a new product. But I think it's in Tesla, it's really about getting the scale, and the Model 2 volume may be the sum of all the current volume today, and maybe double that probably when it gets the scale. So I think that one should command a tremendous amount of priority. And then of course the bot is going to take up much of his time. But again, I think he's a very awkward approach to time management. I think there's very short meetings, very focused meetings, small number of people, and can just move through. When some people look at their calendars on an 8-hour day, they may have, 6 meetings, or so forth, where he could probably take a 16-hour day and possibly, 10 to 20 different topics or more in a day and make critical decisions. I think he's set up his life that way, his work life that way, to be very decision driven, very, very quick, but also time for thought and reflection. And then I do agree with Larry. I think over the last 15 years, he's hired people in his likeness who work, the way he does it. And if they don't, they probably have filtered through the system or moved on themselves. So he's got a good cast of people directly under him. So the priorities are the Model 2, the bot, and I would say also, getting the full autonomy and that rollout piece. I do agree with Larry that there's still development work too. I mean, there's still features that they're still adding, and they've got to get it to a performance level that would be acceptable for wider rollout. So I do think that there's still some time there, but really a lot of the attention now has to turn to regulatory and approval and getting it not only, approved in the US, but getting it approved for beta and for trials in these other major geographies. So I think those are the priorities.
Yeah. The reason I asked the question is because Morgan Stanley recently reported something in their notes saying that they were told, and from their understanding, that Elon has been spending more and more of his time about the bot, right? And then Chris Camillo, who's a friend of ours, who is somebody who's really doing a lot of research on humanoid bots, he also said something similar, that through his sources, he heard this. Now, we know that Elon, what you guys said obviously makes the most sense, right? Elon looks at fires. If there's a fire, that's going to become a priority. One time, the gigafactories were, the critical part. If he doesn't get to turn the gigafactories profitable, the company's going to go significantly be hurt quite a bit. So that's where his focus is. And, he's been focused on all these things. And so to hear that he's actually spending more time on bot, that tells me that possibly, more likely, there is not an immediate fire. Things obviously come to the fore, in seconds and hours and days. And so he'll quickly switch his focus. But I'm glad that he's focusing his attention on bots, that he's able to focus his attention on bots. That, to me, I think, if I had my way, that would be the priority for the company, as long as there aren't any more fires. And I do believe, it's looking like this, like you're saying, that FSD is on its way. Not that he won't, spend an hour here, spend a week, a few days here to really make sure that he understands things. I just listened to an interview of this, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a founder of a company that was bought by X, previously Twitter. And his company is going to add the feature where you can put job postings and career section in X, which is going to generate revenue for X. So he was asked the question, what's it like to work for Elon? And what he said was, first of all, there's this thing that Elon says, which is he doesn't want to hear about anything without him knowing first. So he wanted to have at least been told about some major feature, even on X. So that's interesting. I think that's important that, here's a person who, despite all the companies he's running and he's managing, he still very much wants to be aware of everything that's happening. And I think that that's his way to prioritize and know, okay, that's important. I want to spend time there or that one. And this guy said that, yeah, Elon meets with the whole team at least once a week. And then if it's an important topic, they'll do the update on that once a week. And then he'll go and set up another meeting to dive deeper into these topics. And so Elon has the luxury of having such incredible team, incredible executives. You can leave them alone and let them run. And what he does is he focuses on key areas that are critical to the business. If it's a fire, he needs to come in there and fix it. If it's not a fire, like Larry was saying, right, his best use of his time is in developing programs that are just about to be launched, right? So when he was focused on the Model 2 compact car, this was, Walter Isaacson's book was a year and a bit ago, right? He started focusing on that because that was critical to make sure that, the production line, he's like very focused on every single step of the production line, the design, he's focused on that. So, at the end of the day, I think we all agree, right? Elon's amazing. He knows, we don't need to tell him what the priority is. He knows how to set his own priorities and he's the best at it. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we heard these rumors that he's spending more time on the bot. And for me, that's a fantastic thing to be doing because the Optimus is going to have tremendous value. It's going to be the single largest industry in the world, but it's also going to have the most value to all of his businesses, to all of Tesla. Every single division will benefit from this. And it's not just the fact that this humanoid will actually help the factory, right? It's the AI that they're going to develop for the self reinforcement learning, for the training. All of that can apply to all the industrial robots. It can apply to every part of the business, right? So it's like finally the combination of XAI and X and Tesla and the data warehouses they're building, the supercomputers, FSD, and the bots are all combining together to be just one thing. So that's why I thought it was important to just say that. But right, I mean, I think we all agree if everything there was no fire, and we're sitting here just trying to decide what is the most important thing that can help impact Tesla, there's a lot, right? But I would still, at this point, choose the bot.
Yeah, I think, just knowing what we do about Elon through the several books, it's not just Walter's book, because, there have been a few really interesting books on Elon. And so one can build a composite picture of him. I think he's triggered by novelty and he's triggered by challenge. I just finished reading 2 books on Edison, actually, and the similarity or the commonality between Edison and Elon, although they're actually very different people, but the commonality is very, very striking in terms of always having multiple irons in the fire, always learning from one aspect, from one business he's in and applying it to another business. And also, this notion of this kind of conglomerate of businesses, each its own business, but having this bleed over. Very interesting how Edison managed it over his lifetime. So I'm fascinated to see what comes out of this. I think that he focused a lot of time on Starship before Twitter came along, and then he was in a very concentrated period of time. He was in Twitter, but obviously he gave FSD and certainly the Model 2 or the whatever the next gen is going to be, or the first next gen vehicle is going to be. He spent time on the production line, so he's just got this facility to stretch himself, and God knows where it ends.
Anything else, Jeff?
No, I mean, I think we covered it. I think I just don't think as like normal folks on the outside, we just have any understanding of his bandwidth and what he can do in a day. And that's why he continues to kind of overachieve when we look across all these different areas. So
Yeah.
One thing I will say is that I don't necessarily trust an assumption made by Morgan Stanley on a statement made by an IR person, simply because these are investment bankers who have a particular set of blinders on how they look at business. So I'm not sure they're interpreting and understanding what's being said to them. Just a caveat.
Yeah, for sure. That we've seen that happen several times before.
Yeah.
We'll cover more about Musconomy and all the amazing things that Tesla and Elon, I'm sorry, not Tesla, Elon's companies have accomplished in the last 2 weeks. Everything that he's touching is turning into gold and finally turning into gold. So that's what we covered, Elon's priorities. Let's talk probabilities. So, it's great to have you both here because, of course, it's all probabilities. We don't know what the answer is going to be, but you can make an educated guess. So let's start with the 2 million run rate at this point. Based on what we've seen in the first quarter, what we've been hearing, what do you think is the probability that Tesla will hit above 2 million this year? Start with you, Jeff.
I think it's a bit of a coin flip at this point. I would put it, a coin flip at this point. I look at this Model 3 changeover and the ramp of the new product. I think the new product is going to potentially sell better than the prior product did in its 5th or 6th year of existence. And the prior product just in the US alone was doing 55K a quarter. So pretty slow start in North America for that. I think that picks up. I think the awareness continues of point of sale credit at Model Y. Again, we think when that turned on probably the 3rd week or 4th week of January, we think everybody instantly in the US knows about it. I would say a very small percentage of people know about it, and it just continues to grow in awareness. So that should help. It looks like they're raising prices. I've warned people over the last year that everything that's happened after the January to April timeframe has really been very low in meaning. They're doing price adjustments. The January to April stuff they did last year were more corrections of really large moves. These moves of $1,000 or $500 here or there aren't tremendously meaningful. So let's see what the follow through is when they do this. It looks like they're trying to pull some orders into Q1, which is good. So in terms of 2 million, I think it's a coin flip. It's going to be dependent on if they've solved this Model 3 issue, and if could there be a surprise with Cybertruck? I mean, if they could build 50,000 more, 100,000 more Cybertrucks, I'm not saying they will in the first year, but if they could sell them. So there's a couple of big dependencies there, and I don't think rates are going to have a big impact this year. Even if they do the 3 rate cuts, they're coming in more closer to the second half of the year, and I don't think 0.75 points basis points of cutting the Fed funds rate is going to have a huge impact. I think psychologically it's going to have a huge impact, but I don't think economically it does. Right. Let's just hope credit stays good and people can continue to get car loans, because right now the rejection rate is its highest it's ever been since they started measuring it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think the Cybertruck ramp has surprised me. I thought it was going to go very slowly in the first quarter. It'd be interesting to know what you think they've been, but I think it might hit the 4,000 mark. Do you agree with that, Jeff, or do you think that's a little too high?
Maybe 30. I mean, in terms of production, yeah, maybe 3,500 to 4K is possible, and deliveries below that. And right now, it's really more about the daily run rate and where do we think they're at.
Yeah, well, yeah. So that run rate is going to have an impact on the total for the year, and the improving the run rate of the new Model 3 is going to have a huge impact on the year. So I think 2 million is, it's a reach right now, but anything can happen in the second quarter, and they've got time to make it up. But, lots of things are not going right now, and not the least of which is the actual sales.
So I guess let me tell me if I'm wrong the way I'm thinking about this. Okay, so clearly March, this quarter and maybe next quarter is going to be bad for a variety of reasons, right? There was that canal issue. There was the Model 3 Highland. There was hiccups. There was the Giga Berlin arson, that kind of stuff. But they're not going to just sell 10% more than it was last year, which is 2 million. They're going to sell more than that. And they have the ability. It's like it's based on production. If they can make more than 2 million cars, vehicles, whether it's made up of Cybertruck and Highland and all these things, they will just lower the price. Tell me why they wouldn't lower the price to hit 2.1 million, for example, so that they get a 20% growth from last year. Would they be concerned about margins? At this point, not certainly not the next second half of this year. But if they can produce it, they will sell it. Jeff, you've always talked about how they'll want them to have their factories to be at least 80 to 85% capacity. So they'll produce as much as they can, and then they'll just lower the price to sell it. What's wrong with that logic?
I actually don't. I mean, I think there's some instances that we pointed out of Model 3 and Cybertruck being production limited. I don't believe the Model Y is production limited. And by the way, I think the Model 3 issue in the US seems to be battery related, because when I go on the website to order a Model 3 rear wheel drive, that's the LFP pack, it says I can get it the same month that I ordered. When I go to order a long range Model 3 product, it gives me a 3-month window ahead, the next 3 months. So that tells me they could be battery constrained in North America. And part of that traces back to the 4680 and why we couldn't get more Model Y onto the 4680 and then free up the 2170s for the Model 3. But anyway, will they lower price more? That's a good question. I keep going back and forth on it. That they could if it would appreciably improve utilization at suppliers. I think they would. But it's a complicated situation. They've got to look at their inventories. They've got to look at what's going on from a macro perspective, because macro could, at least macro auto and macro economy wise, it could dip to the point where you don't want to cut your prices too low, where you actually start, really damaging the brand of the product. So I don't know if I buy that there's a lot more work to do on price. It's very possible that they could, but like I said, everything that's happened since April of last year hasn't been overly
small numbers now. Yeah.
Very small numbers in price cuts. So, and I don't know, I don't think we look back on the 5-year trajectory of the product. We look back 5 years from now, if we're at 1.95 or if we're at 2.05 this year, I don't know if that makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. You guys saw that Tesla announced just a few days ago that they're now producing enough 4680s for 1,000 Cybertrucks. They did that last week. So maybe the assumption is going to be every week from now on, maybe not, but it's more likely that it's every week from now on. And then, Drew Baglino did say in the last earnings call that he doesn't see that we're going to be battery constrained. He might have just been referring to the Cybertruck, but still, I'm not hearing that there's a battery constraint issue. Certainly there's issues with the Model 3. That's why it's not available for the IRA, and they're doing what they can to probably fix that. But I just I'm not hearing that battery constraints the issue for the year in terms of like not being able to sell more than 2 million, yeah, or not being able to produce 2.1 million or 2.2 million this year.
I'm not sure I agree with you, because they're not rolling out the Semi, which they would be doing unless it's just a factory constraint. And it's going to be a while before that factory's built. So that could be the constraint, but it could also be the batteries. Time will tell. There are actually quite a few battery factories in development right now across the US, and some of them have got contracts to supply Tesla. So, it could well be a battery issue, but I'm not convinced. I think it's just they're really struggling to get it up and running.
Semi, yeah, you're right.
Well,
No,
you're right. Semi, they got to build the factory, and then there could be a constraint on 4680. So I agree,
Yeah.
it could be both. And I think the battery issue is not a global macro issue. Like there's plenty of raw materials, there's plenty of cell and pack capacity. But it gets complicated. You've got to match the right battery pack for the right vehicle, and then you got to do it in the right region at the right point in time. And if you actually look at Tesla's SKU mix and where they build product and where they source batteries from, it's not entirely fungible as you can just move different, product in and out. And they've tried to, they want to capture as much of this IRA as possible. So, long story short, I think there's just some regional issues with battery. That's why I said I give the example on Model 3. I can get one the same month if I do rear wheel drive. But I don't think there's an issue with getting, 2.2 million sets of batteries for the year. It's more of like, can you match everything to supply for each factory with the right timing? That's where some of the issue may be. And there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, in demand too. So that gets suppliers kind of slowing down a bit. That gets OEM slowing down a bit. But I think Tesla's positioned from a CapEx perspective to do it. The question is, what are they putting? What are they putting kind of demand on? Like, and they're the best ones. They see the daily order book volume. They're the best ones to see this and really understand where it's at. So it'll be interesting to see what the tone is the third week of April on the earnings call.
All right. Sounds like we're at 50%, 50%, 50-50, coin to flip for 22. So let's talk Cybertruck. A few months ago, 3 months ago, Larry, you were the most bullish about the Cybertruck. Is there going to be a surprise? I mean, I think the institutional analysts, they think there's only going to be 30,000 Cybertrucks sold in this year. But then when you heard that they've now making enough 4680 batteries for about 1,000 Cybertrucks per week, that's 4,000 a month. That's 50,000 just that alone. On top of
but
what
they
we're doing
could
now.
be doing 3 times that in 6 months. I mean,
What's your where are you putting Cybertruck? Is there going to be a Cybertruck surprise, and what does that mean? What's your the probabilities of what might happen?
I was very bullish about this year. I may have to eat my words if Troy Teslak is right, but I think they could do well over 80,000 Cybertrucks this year. I mean, they're coming out of there very, very rapidly. They're not having production problems. I'm not sure they've got all their machines aligned yet, but it looks like it's building very rapidly. Every day we see a larger number of Cybertrucks parked out there. So it's definitely ramping. And then once you get to like that situation where you're doing, a couple of hundred a day, that from there on the ramp goes pretty smoothly, I think. And if that's so, they could beat that 80,000 quite handily.
Yeah.
Oh, Jeff. Yeah.
I think the number. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that you and Larry both have a Cybertruck on order. Larry says you're going to get yours very soon, right, Larry? Tomorrow night. Jeff, you've got one in order. So both of you are waiting for yours. But yeah, based on your own experience and what you've been hearing.
Jeff some pictures just every night.
I've got one.
Please, I'll print them out and put them under my pillow.
Yeah.
I think a key number is to getting to around somewhere between 300 and 350 a day, on a 6 or 6.5 day work week. That would get it to the 100K run rate. When you install 125K capacity and you're using about 80% of it, I think, you're at a good clip. So I think Tesla's really targeting for this first phase of CapEx install to getting somewhere in that area. And what Tesla's doing right now is they're building Cybertrucks. They have a controlled launch. They're shipping them. They're looking at the quality data. They're looking at the defects. They're looking at their internal quality data. And they're trying to figure out how do they improve efficiencies and what's that next CapEx order? What are they changing? Is this Schuler machine, this machine that does all the stainless, flattening and forming, and conditioning, is that, is there a version 2 of that machine that's going to help get them tighter tolerances? I'm sure that they're asking their CapEx suppliers and their key process suppliers to work on these things. And that's why you do kind of stage CapEx in chunks when you're doing something brand new like this, is so that you can continue to take the cog structure down and call it, like they would probably call it some internal like Gen 2 of the Cybertruck. So that's what I think they're doing. I think they're installing that next bit of CapEx, in the factory at some point, various points throughout this year. And at some point, maybe near the end of the year, they're going to update the CapEx or the capacity for Cybertruck to a larger number. And then they'll go back and retrofit, the early stuff and whatever improvements that are going to be needed in that. So I think that's ultimately where they're focused. Again, when you're doing new mechanicals, new electrical architecture, the worst thing you can do is just flood and get a bunch out there that it's called like driving ahead of your headlights, where you just really don't understand the data coming back from the field fast enough, and you're just building too quickly. And then that's where you can get yourself into real trouble, both from a quality and perception of product perspective, as well as financially. So I actually think I actually like this controlled rollout approach. Do I want my Cybertruck tomorrow? Sure. Can I wait a couple weeks or a couple months? Sure. And I think this is a more prudent approach. But I think what's actually happening right now in the factory is we saw all the job postings. Alexandra showed that to us of their second shift. So I think they're starting to hire those people. And the way that classically works is they'll get enough people for a certain process area, and they'll probably put them on the bottleneck process area and have them work on that on another shift so they can continue processing material. They'll get the bottleneck process area staff first on the new alternate shift, and eventually they'll build the entire shift out and then commission it and bring it online. And then you'll see another big jump in vehicle output throughout the year. So you will see it increasing. You'll see the first shift getting better. You'll see them bringing in this next shift, but really just working on the bottleneck areas. Then they'll fill out that full shift, get it hired, and then you'll see another jump. And then you'll see another jump when they put in that next installment of CapEx throughout the year. So what you're seeing now is not the run rate you're going to see at the end of the year. You're going to see a significant bump up at the end of the year. But I've always been kind of somewhere in the 60 to 75K range on Cybertrucks for the year. I'm still there. We'll see how it goes over the coming weeks.
So I got a question for you, Jeff. I'm trying to reconcile a couple things, right? Didn't he say that the Cybertruck was initially designed by first principle to be easily to manufacture?
Yeah.
Right? So the concept would be that once you've worked out the kinks and you've rolled this out, starting to do that, they should be able to produce more, quicker, faster, cheaper than they've ever done before because of the design. Okay. Having said that, the other part was the reconcile part is that it's also brand new technology though. 48 volts, steer by wire. It's like the most technological advanced vehicle ever made. And so that, like you're saying, you always, you don't know if you're doing it right. You want small numbers first, really find out. So there's competing things. So is that like once you start producing 1,000 a week, Cybertrucks a week, at that point, isn't it an exponential curve of how many more you can just pump out? Because at that point, you should have worked out everything before. Why would you make 1,000 a week if you hadn't yet resolved all those issues? You know what I mean? Where are you still thinking till next year before they'll really just go and scale it up? Or is it somewhere half the year?
I think you're misreading what Jeff said. He said they'll get to 80,000 this year or around that.
Which is high. That's high.
Quite an exponential curve there, right there.
It is.
I mean, right now, what are they doing? A couple of hundred a day, would you say, Jeff? Is that reasonable? Yeah. And, to get from there to 1,000 is a 5X. 1,000's not bad. But then to get to 2 or 3,000 is, 200 and 300x. So it is a lot of scaling to happen. I'm trying to remember the scaling of the Model 3 where they, had all that pain and suffering, and I was following the VINs on a daily basis. And they got, they scaled that fairly rapidly, I'd say over 4 month period, despite all the travails.
Yeah, I mean, don't quote me, but I think the first quarter of Model Y was like 1,600 units. The second quarter was maybe like 13,000 units. So these things take a bit of time. I don't know if they're gonna get to 80. I said 60 to 75K. And that's why I think the 300-day run rate is important when they get to that, because that 300-day run rate would represent 100K roughly annualized. And I think that's a big milestone for them internally. But in short, Herbert, yes, this is designed for manufacturability. It's probably designed for serviceability as well. But you have to get each of those new processes to their peak run rate. And that's the challenge with a new product, new technology they got to get to. But I think this is working out well for Tesla, especially debugging the 48 volt architecture at low volume versus trying to do that on the Model 2. So I think they're in a good spot.
Okay. Wonderful. That's Cybertruck. I think both of you think that there could actually be a surprise. Let's talk full self-driving, right? What's the likelihood? What's the probability? Has things changed? I think most of us agree it has changed. The probability has gone up since we've seen 12.3, since we heard that Elon say that every 2 weeks there's going to be a new release. They've got 3 new releases planned, and that he said that by April, it's going to be, shiny. It's going to be really good. But we ourselves are playing with it. And so far, there was another big wave that came out where 12.3 is distributed. And then this weekend, there's going to be a 12.3.1 released. And everybody's just amazing reactions from folks. So what's the probability of FSD uptake to 50%? And I'm not saying now, let's say, by next year, 1 year from now, what's the likelihood that we will get to 50%? Not that it'll be 50% uptake by then, And what's the likelihood that we'll have a rollout globally? Just what's your thinking about FSD? Start with you, Larry.
I think, that this full stack of a single neural net or an integrated neural net stack is going to enable them to make the evolutions very much faster. So we're actually on a march of 9s now. I don't think it's going to be. I doubt it's going to be FSD ready before the end of this year. I doubt it. I would be incredibly pleased if it happened. But I see us getting there and next year being the sort of FSD business year. And I think I would just encourage Tesla to become very aggressive on pricing, to really roll it out to the entire US driving force, and to be very aggressive about rolling it out in Europe and be aggressive in pricing it there as well. I think it's time to really, build on the excitement and momentum, and it could really juice the earnings this year very dramatically, because it's just pure profit, pure margin. So that's what I'd like to see. And I don't think Elon's going to be persuaded by me, but that would make a difference. And I think we'd get to FSD faster that way, honestly, because we'd be forced to actually address many of the edge cases. I don't know how Jeff feels about that.
That's only if you're thinking that data is the constraint, and therefore more people using FSD gets you more data, which I don't think personally, I don't believe that that's the case
I don't
anymore.
think the data is the constraint. I just
No.
think the number of edge cases are so large that we have to tackle more and more and more of them. The March of Nines is it's a terrible march. Believe me, I've been on it several times. It's so difficult. It is so difficult because just to identify the problems is it needs volume, real volume. It means people in every little nook and cranny of the road system and in multiple different states and in, multiple different seasons. So I would just encourage them to just expand and by the way, if they just expanded the whole fleet very dramatically, it would leave the competitors in even more difficult position, and it would really seal the deal as far as licensing the product elsewhere. I don't know, Jeff.
Yeah. Before you get Joe, I just want to stop and think about it for a second, right? We've got 12.3, which is the very first iteration of 12, right? Which is the first iteration of an end-to-end neural net system, and it's now out to 3%, probably more than 3% of the 400,000 beta users. But it's looking like that. I think most of us agree that this is going to be replacing the version 11 point dot whatever it is. And so very, very shortly, 400,000 beta testers will be using the new neural net end-to-end system.
It's not a lot.
And it's not a lot. It's not enough, maybe. Okay, but it's like more. What do you mean it's not a lot? First of all, it's probably the most of any kind of neural net.
I don't care about
real world.
I'm telling you, my experience, we need more.
Of course.
To see a couple of million.
Right. And the way to do that is lower the take rate, the cost per month, and then therefore get even more. I agree with you, by the way. I think that's true. I'm just saying that imagine now you're going to have 400,000 people driving this car, and then if they can have an automated way to find edge cases and disengagements, whatever, and then it's self-learning, maybe. I don't know if that's the way it works. But yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, I agree with the needing the larger sample size, and I've done the March of Nines with the network infrastructure before. I would approach it a little bit differently, but I think we still need the same end goal. First off, I would get the product to be very good to where people want to purchase it at a higher rate. So the data point we have from the US, I think it was 23% download rate a year ago, and that was off of version 10. So get version 12 out there in its shiny form, as Elon calls it. Understand what the uptake rate is. You can do that very quickly. And then I would have new forms of payment ready before I would actually go in and cut price. So for example, I would look at a per driver, per mile type charge, just like we're used to plugging into a supercharger and seeing the cost tick up every few cents as it's charging. Well, what if they did it per mile versus per month on subscription? So maybe offer a couple of different opportunities like that. I mean, when it gets ready and to the point of it's very good, I'm assuming that they may just take everybody who's not on the program, just give them a month free trial and say, try it out. And then from there, they can see their uptake rate from going from the free trial to just staying on subscription. And then again, have these other products ready if it's per mile or per drive. And then from there, you can make a set of decisions that says, we have our best product out there. This is the uptake rate we have today. This is the uptake rate we need from a gross margin perspective, from a revenue perspective, and also from a learning perspective. And then from that point, if you need to change or update pricing, do it. The other thing you have in your back pocket is you have the global expansion. Because once you're at the point where it's stable in the US, you can now take that version and go to other geographies where there's a couple million Teslas in Europe, and there's a couple million Teslas in China and the rest of Asia. And I think that's your other opportunity to get more there. And I think now you're set up, once you're stable in North America, now you're probably set up for the licensing conversations in North America. And then once you're stable in another region, then you're set up for licensing discussions there. So I think it's really about, for Tesla, getting to this race to stability.
You guys want
They don't even
to?
have all the features coded. By the way, they don't even have all the features yet. And so when you're doing any kind of software, you want to get the feature complete. There's kind of a race to feature complete, and there's kind of a race to stability, both code stability and performance. Yeah.
What do you think he meant by saying by April it's going to be shiny? No bugs, right? Less bugs.
I love Elon, but even Elon doesn't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
it's an unknowable thing, but the more people look, one thing I will say to Jeff, the drive in version 12 is somewhere that my wife is ready to take on. And that, I mean, she's been very courageous, because very early on in version 10, I said, it's going to be it's going to be exciting. She said, all right, I'm up for it. And it was very exciting, getting around some of those corners and getting stuck in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the road. I mean, it's just incredible, the excitement but now, I mean, wives and children and friends are all comfortable, really comfortable, because it really does feel like it's driving well. So I think the time has come to really, get the crowd using it.
Would you guys venture to say that the probability is greater than 50% that we are now going to be able to, not saying that, without another revision, this is, we're on path to solving autonomy, or maybe getting a licensing partnership? Is it now more than 50%?
You're talking about sometime doing it, or you're talking about doing it this year? I mean, there's a time factor and an absolute can they do it factor. I think we're past the absolute can they do it factor.
For sure,
A lot of people outside the community don't agree with that, but I think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think these other companies are putting themselves at enterprise risk if they don't engage with Tesla, very quickly, because of the time duration from engagement, the non-recurring engineering work, and then to get your next vehicle scaled. I think they're to the point of, enterprise risk. Enterprise risk meaning, your company could be at a point where it's on a path to bankruptcy, not bankrupt per se, but on a path to it. And I think that time is actually now. So I would be surprised over the next 90 days if there's not a number that we transition from other companies aren't asking, to they are asking about it, to there's inbound calls, to an agreement started. And I know there's another conversation today of, do they even know about it? I guarantee you, all of these companies, they have the latest Teslas, they have multiples of them, and they're waiting for their V12 download too.
Jeff, right now, look, V12 couldn't have come a minute earlier, because right now they're evaluating NVIDIA, Tesla. That's what's happening in the boardroom right now. NVIDIA, Tesla. And a lot of them are leaning to NVIDIA because it's not a direct competitor. But when they look at the cost of the NVIDIA system, when they look at the constraints of the NVIDIA system and the time scales and the uncertainty, and they look at the performance of the Tesla system, I think that, this is the time that they strike a deal. And I still think it's going to be Ford. I've driven this blue cruise of Fords. It's very funny. It's a joke. Anyway, we'll see.
If I'm one of them, I'm entertaining both. And because you want to keep both, I mean, you're talking about, the cost structure for both the network infrastructure and compute, the cost structure in the vehicle. This can't be a one-horse race. Otherwise, the cost structure is going to be really prohibitive for these companies that don't have any of these assets. So if I'm them, I'm kind of like, all right, we're going to be in the lab for a year, and I'm going to bring you both in. And that's what if I were them, I would be doing that, because that's how you're going to get the most competitive, you're going to get the most competitive bids out of both. But I think with Tesla, the advantage, if you have none of these assets, you've got a company that actually builds automobiles and knows how to take it from the point that you're at as a new OEM to the point of it actually rolling out to real consumers, where NVIDIA does not have that experience on their staff. So Tesla still has a lead, but I'd say that lead could be closing if we don't make some pretty big moves here over the next, call it 3 to 6 months.
We've got to see NVIDIA actually drive, and we've got to see how well they do. Time will tell.
Yeah.
And you
Okay.
know, the suite, I don't know. Well, let's see what happens.
By the way, I don't think all training data is created equal as well. I think all these 80 OEMs that they're working with, they're equipped with different sensors, they're equipped with different cameras mounted in different locations, and we don't understand those effects. And so I just don't. I think people are trying to like generalize and say, well, NVIDIA's going to catch up and they're going to get all this scale really quickly. I don't know if all this is created equal. And I would have to think that as long as you have all the right engineering assets and compute assets, the vertically integrated approach, I think, would get the market much faster than the non-vertically integrated approach. Yeah. But let's see how it plays out.
Yeah, I just watched Jim Fan's presentation, NVIDIA. He's in charge of the embodied AI, and he was showing pretty impressive just using simulation, right? Using video, creating simulation to be able to teach a bot, which is, in their minds, a bot can be humanoid, but it can also be anything with a camera, like a car, and then be able to learn and be able to test things in simulation first. So the question is, could that work? Or do you really need real world? Like, you really need that. And I think the answer is you need the real world. That's why NVIDIA partnered with all of these. You need both. Yeah, that's why you partner with all of these humanoid bots, because they all need to go out in the real world, test out what they're learned. And then they call it a one shot, right? Which is, once I've learned it in the simulation, could I in one shot actually do it in real world? But they need all that feedback. And they're saying it doesn't matter. It crosses embodiments, Jeff, so that it doesn't matter. Like they figured it out, like multiple different cameras, different arms, like one thing has 8 legs, one has 2, it doesn't matter. 5 joints versus 1, it figures it out. So we'll see if that is successful. But I love that you put 90 days. So you're saying 90 days, you're expecting some sort of, whether or not they're starting, not that there's an announcement of a partnership, but some sort of movement in partnerships with FSD.
These things will move quickly.
I think so too. I mean, again, FSD 12.3, and if they actually are able to drop a new improvement every 2 weeks, even if it's like a month, that alone could actually just make people realize it's already this good, and then it's improving quickly.
Well, let's
better move fast.
Let's put a pin in 2 weeks' time and talk about it again.
I know you don't think it's going to happen in 2 weeks. I'm not saying it will. It might take a month. I get you. That's what you're saying. Let's talk bot.
Hey, just remember one more thing, Herbert.
Yeah.
Just one more thing. 99% of our conversation on this topic is about performance and how does it working and capability, and they should license it. We spent 1% of the time talking about, is it economically viable and feasible, like the way it's designed? Does it have the right power consumption, and does it have the right cost structure? And we spend 1% of the time on that, and that's what Tesla's actually solved. They solved that in the very beginning. And others have not. So anyway, we can move on.
and power consumption. So there is a lot of questions to answer, and we don't know. We do know that Elon turned down the NVIDIA solution originally 7 years ago, because of the cost and the bloat of the NVIDIA software, which I've heard conflicting stories about, but there you are.
All right. So I've got one last question before you go, Larry. The question is Tesla bot. I'm going to make a statement, and you guys can tell me if it's right or wrong. I will tell you that there is a 50% chance that Tesla will drop a demo in the next 2 weeks. And then there is a 90% chance it will drop within the next, I'll give it 60 days. Tesla bot demo.
What demo?
Any Tesla bot demo.
That's a cheap bet. I mean,
it's going to happen. I'm just telling you now, it's going to happen because every bot company is dropping a demo every single day. This entire week, there's one dropped every day, and they're all trying to outdo each other. Tesla's due for one.
I don't think it matters. I don't think another demo matters at this point. I know the people who are betting on these different companies and so on. They get very excited about these demos and stuff. It doesn't mean diddly squat to me. It really doesn't. But
it's for bragging rights. It's for hiring the top talent. It's to not sit back. But Tesla, right? You would probably say this, right, Jeff? If you're the leader, you can stay quiet. You don't have to do all this stuff. You can just.
I would. The only thing I'd only demo is the fact that I have a supply chain and industrial team staffed and ready to actually make this thing. And I don't think the other companies can actually demo that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate you, Larry. Thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, Alexandra and the others weren't able to make today, but appreciate you joining us and join us more. Thank you so much, Larry. Thanks, Jeff. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Great to see you, Larry. Herbert, thanks.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.